This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
Don't fill your time up, because then you'll miss out on the things you might have really wanted to do and you'll waste a bunch of time. And so I'm filling them up as I feel like there's things that are worthwhile. What I don't want to do is look back and say, boy, I wasted that 5 years.
All right, I am really pumped about this conversation today. And if that sounds like my normal open, this one hits different. And the reason it's different is because I'm sitting with a guy that has for basically 25 years, and actually it was 24 and a half years. We're going to have that chat too, Rick, who gave himself to a company here in San Diego. And look, I moved to California in 2004 to write movies, not live one. I mean, I feel like I'm living a movie. And the more I learned this market, Rick, the more you kind of I realized there were probably about 10 brands in the market that sure felt like I felt. Like it wasn't about being San Diego's biggest anything. It was about making a global impact. And Viasat, I mean, if you look at what you've done for the last 25 years since you'd been there, Viasat's on that list. So first of all, welcome to the squad. Welcome to the Courageous Podcast. Let me know if I'm getting the term right or wrong, Rick. You were chairman, you were president, you were CFO. You kind of held a lot of roles there. What was the last role? Am I getting this right?
Well, I came in as CFO not because I'm not a finance guy, but they were growing this little company. So we'll get there, I think, eventually. But yeah, I was CFO for about a year, and I was chief operating officer, then president, then CEO. And then I finished the last couple of years as vice chairman, just kind of working strategic projects.
So 24 and a half years you were there, right? 99 to,
right.
To, well, you couldn't make it 6 more months to get that 25-year anniversary. What happened?
No, it was 5 years too long. I had turned my 2-year notice in 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now.
So. Oh man. Let's start here, with the here and now. So you're 7 months in on retirement or on your new life. Do you like the word retirement? Do you not like the word retirement?
It doesn't really matter to me. I don't think those terms kind of define you, and people get hung up on them. It's just the next phase, the new life, next phase of life.
Well, give me some color there. I mean, I'm sure your wife has to be happier about this, that she gets to see you.
Yeah, it's amazing that she is. She seems to be really happy. We get to spend some time together. We got plenty of things to do on our own. I can't play golf very often. I'm not that good, and I can't just sit around and there's no TV. So you've got to do something. And so I'm still I am really busy. I've had some guys trying to have lunch with me or dinner, and they're like, they have a hard time getting on the schedule. Like, man, you were busier than you were kind of the last couple of years. What's going on? And it's I'm having a blast. And there is a next phase, and I'm loving it.
I saw on the trusty LinkedIn, page there that you had Big. It was called Big Baldridge Investor Group. Is that part of your current, or are you pretty disciplined about, hey, I'm going to help people where I can, but I'm at peace with just enjoying this moment?
No, no, it's definitely what I'm focusing on. So I'm going to take my time through it. We've had a real estate thing for about 17 years now, but Big is really, and that falls within that group. But I've been doing some pharma and medical device investment work. I'm doing a lot of work on generative AI, just understanding winners and losers in that market. We're looking at commercial real estate things. So yeah, I'm pretty active in it, but I don't have to make a decision to feel engaged. To me, the homework is the most fun part.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, what's cool to hear is that it's sort of you're never done learning, right?
Right.
It's just kind of you keep there is no end. They're just sort of and it's funny, so my dad is my dad is 82. I'm doing the math. He owns a law firm based out of DC, and he's definitely of the use it or lose it mindset for him. And so it keeps him sharp
Mm.
and like it's the same thing. He's trying to serve, but he's learning as he goes along. Are you of that same sort of mentality as long as you're using the brain and you're learning and you're still growing, you're going?
Yeah, I think that what I'm not doing now is filling every moment up. I'm reserving a lot of moments for things that come up. You know, uh, I'll drive the grandkids to school one day, or I'll pick them up one day, or I'll pick them up and take them to soccer. I want to have some time available to go do that stuff when it's there, uh, but yet be completely engaged and busy the rest of the time.
So have you created any new commandments for like how life should be as you know it for this next phase?
I'm reading a lot, and there's a couple guys I follow that are I'd say good advisors. I'm meeting with people. I started doing that a few years ago when I was getting ready. Uh, so I'm trying to figure it out. The one best advice I got was don't fill your time up because then you'll miss out on the things you might have really wanted to do and you'll waste a bunch of time. And so I'm filling them up as I feel like there's things that are worthwhile. What I don't want to do is look back and say, boy, I wasted that 5 years. Should have done something different.
This is also great advice if you're gonna like set an itinerary for a vacation. I am definitely of the mindset that 50% should be booked and 50% should be open as you find something to do. You're like, you know what? Yes, I am just going to go to the beach today and do nothing, which is something. Let's call it something. Are you, do you come from a family where every moment is sort of discussed and figured out for you on vacations, or do you guys have how's that go?
There's no, I don't think that any in my group is close. If you go with my sister, she schedules the downtime. So it's every, so you get 2 hours between here and here to do whatever you want to do. So uh, I tend to like to have some things. I'm closer to you, 50-50. I think that's a good number.
Yeah. Um, so I'm now 20 in on being an entrepreneur. I, I, I'll be the first to acknowledge I don't know anything. Like I'm learning stuff every day and I'm at peace with where I'm at. But as you think about your journey and like I always like to say that courage is regret insurance. It's like, that's all it is. Like if you look back at somebody like me or other entrepreneurs that are listening, what's like the one or two main pieces of feedback you would give us on how we go about navigating these waters?
I think it's really important to have a plan. So, I think if you just get up and say, "Oh, what do I want to do today?" That you're going to waste a lot of effort and time. So, doesn't mean it's the old everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the nose, Mike Tyson quote. But
Yep.
having a plan, I think is just really really important. So, Donna and I, my wife and I, we take time to sit down and go over our calendars and schedule and make sure those kind of big rocks get put in place that you can work around. And I think that's a really really critical thing. So whether that's at work and home or at home and work, making sure that you've got kind of those big rocks covered, uh, and making sure that you don't fill all the empty spaces with things. It's really good to be busy, but to not have time, you know a buddy of mine shows up at the house and he's going through something and I don't have the time to talk to him, or I'm constantly looking at my phone, and that's not okay. And so I think making sure those critical priorities are dealt with, schedules planned, and then that you have time to work around that.
It's good to hear. I mean, I'm not doing my CFO friends any favor when I say this, but it's nice to hear someone that comes from the CFO and COO world has the EQ to know on when to keep it about people and being there for people. And I've always felt that it starts with relationships. Like, what's the relationship you're building? Are you actually there for the right reasons? And usually the good things will come if that's the case. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
let's pivot this to Viasat, because I mean, it is a rocket ship. It's been a rocket ship, and pun fully intended. When you look back at the 25 years giving yourself to the business, is it what you thought it would be? Like, has it gone where you thought it would go?
No, not at all. I didn't. I think the goal that we had was uh, stay very long-term focus. You're a public company, so you got to deal with the quarterly stuff. But if you sell out and start making decisions for next quarter, you're going to make really bad decisions for the long-term part of that company. And so, what the process we would go through is lay out the next few years and lay a plan out and where we thought the businesses could go, and then always has some seeds for new things, and then compare ourselves. How are we doing with that plan? Were we right? Were we not right? Constantly pivoting, but we'd always look back and say, here was our plan 5 years ago. Here's 4 years ago. Here's what it was 3 years ago. What are those things that are happening? And then just constantly try to look for expansion. There's a really good book written a while back called Every Company is a Growth Company. And I love that book because some of the principles in it are not everything you're doing can be good. You might be in a business that you need to exit. That doesn't mean you can't be a growth company. It doesn't mean you can't refocus and reinvent and think about things that are in markets that are growing and go do that. So I think that's what we thought about doing, is figuring out how to do things where we had some distinct advantage, some way to disrupt in the markets that we were in, and to never to try to protect the environment that we were in, but try to innovate. And so I think that just one thing led to another, and we kept looking for opportunities to grow. And at some point, we ended up owning enough intellectual property. Those are kind of some moats that you can put in place to protect your space. So, I think the roots of Viasat were really the old Linkabit company, which led to Qualcomm and several other companies around the thing. And it's really an intellectual property based, company that used technology as a way to create advantages. And so that resonated with me from the beginning. That's why I took a big cut in pay and joined this little company in San Diego. And there were a whole bunch of attributes about it I liked, and one wasn't here's our long-term plan, and 30 years from now we want to do this and we want to have this exit or whatever it was. It's just, no, we just want to keep innovating and growing businesses.
For those who don't know, can you give like the 1 minute pull the Rick string on how do you go about explaining what Viasat is and does?
So I'd say it starts with technology, but we're a communications company primarily, and satellite communications has turned out to be the area where we focused on. But it's not all satellite. Some of it is terrestrial communications links and so forth. And so what we've done is focus on inventing new types of satellites that take advantage of common communication technologies like frequency reuse. Think about the cellular market, the wireless market. That's how they created much more network density, is with frequency reuse. So you could do that from space. All the satellite companies were really focused on, we can get the same thing to everybody. Think about a broadcast TV. We get the same message to everybody. And by doing that, we drive cost of transmission down. And so we said, there's another way to build those. And that's how do we get a lot of data to many different people and unique data. So you want something on demand and I want something different. How do we build a satellite that does that efficiently? And so that's the direction we turned. Nobody was doing that. And all the incumbent satellite operators didn't want it to happen because it devalued billions of dollars of assets in space. So we focused on that. And along the way, we became really good at another thing, and that was security. So in building communication products for the government, encryption and security is a really critical thing. And there were a few players that dominated that market. They were much bigger than us, but they were focused on just really the encryption part. We didn't think that was the future. We thought the future was focusing on the networking part. So how do you create a secure environment in a way that manages networks that are very, very dynamic? And that kind of propelled us to be number one in that market space. And so you link those two, communication and security, and it's a pretty good place to live. So that's kind of what we focused, and those things just kept growing.
I mean, my background is in story and marketing, comms, and I've been, this is probably the most courageous thing I bring up today. So just know that I'm going there right now. But like, I'm like baffled that most people don't really know Viasat the way that I think they should. Like, and then, I'm surrounded by other Baldridges. Shout out to the other Baldridges, one who's a lawyer who will remind me of, you got to remember the security side. You got to remember the government side of this. And so it's almost like, well, how do you tell a story that's not going to handcuff you? Like you want to get the story out, but yet we got to be careful what we say and how we say it because, well, security is real, right? Defense is real. Where's that line?
Yeah, it's honestly, I think it's a area of weakness of the company. Yeah, I don't think we're really good storytellers, and I think they are now working on that more than ever. That it kind of worked for us for a while. Every time we launched a new satellite, stock went way up, and then in the meantime, people would say, "Well, they can't keep doing this," and the stock would come down. And so those kind of things have happened. But there's really uh, we really haven't ever done a great job of telling the story. I'd say we did a good job, and I'd say the messaging out there on the company and what its purpose is right now is pretty good. But I don't think, I think that's definitely been a weakness within Viasat.
Yeah, and look, you're going up against a guy right now who he's the opposite. Like he's sort of one of the best storytellers we've seen. And again, I don't want to do the same thing I've done, which is use your brand. I still call it your brand, by to talk about SpaceX. But the
Yeah,
reality of it is that's kind of part of the deal. Is like almost ask for permission later, but you get all the residue of story. But it's interesting to hear you kind of say maybe we could be better, and it sounds like there's an investment being made on that story right
right.
now.
Yeah, I think there is. There's certainly a understanding that that's a weakness. So, and a lot of it was, just given the types of things we're working on. If you do too much storytelling, you foreshadow exactly what you're doing. So I think Steve Jobs did a great job, and not that I'm a Steve Jobs fan, but I'm a fan of a lot of what he accomplished, and he did a great job of protecting those things he didn't want to foreshadow, but also telling a great story about what the purpose and where we're going and the types of things we're trying to do. And so I think it's that balance, and Nancy Doherty's group helped him a lot in helping develop that, and so I think it can be done. I think there's a lot of improvement there. I think the platform that SpaceX has to go, to be honest with you, I'm a huge fan again of the innovation and of the type of effort and just no boundary approach that they've taken to what they're doing. At the same time, I don't agree with a lot of the kind of mechanism and methods. And I actually don't think when you actually visually see the process of communicating a story, it's not that well done. And so, but what they've accomplished is so. There's two different juxtaposed positions. One, I think Steve Jobs was great at telling that stories, and I don't think Elon is. But I think creating reusable rockets, whether that's the big differentiator at the end, you have to launch a whole bunch of satellites a year for reusable rockets to actually make sense. The only way you launch a whole bunch every year is to create a need for it. So Starlink launching a whole bunch of LEO satellites creates demand for a lot of launches, creates demand for reusable rockets. And so without all that stuff, that ecosystem doesn't work. And so if one of those things starts falling apart, that whole story falls apart and valuations change pretty dramatically. So you saw Tesla, had the first down year since its inception just recently. Why? There's a whole bunch of really good electric cars out there in the competition, but he drove a lot of that kind of change in how people thought about it, and so valuations went through the roof. You can't do any wrong. There'll be other really good innovators in that space and really good cars. And so I think in the long run, taking over a long period of time, those things will tend to normalize. They used to say, in the short run, the Wall Street is a voting machine. In the long run, it's a weighing machine. And I think those things do tell themselves over a long period.
I know you haven't been in the building for 6 or 7 months, and you're enjoying golf clubs when you can get to that, or maybe not at all on the golf course. But I was just to say, the perfect assignment for our team was, we want to be a special forces that helps you figure out your special, or bring to life your special. I mean, you've had 25 years to connect with people inside Viasat. What do you think is the one sort of big aha special that makes this place different than the rest?
It gets harder. Those things get harder as the company grows, right? But I would say it was really two things. One, I think we recruited, incredibly bright team. I mean, we did really well in the recruiting space, and that's kind of where the team was focused on. And number two is a meritocracy. So this whole idea of structure and hierarchy doesn't exist. The good ideas can come from anywhere in the organization. Now, over time, leaders creep into the company that kind of want that power, and your job, unfortunately, my job a lot over time, is just to take those people out, because that's not what we want to promote, but they can create some damage in the meantime. So that just happens. But the meritocracy nature, I don't care whether you're a brand new hire or you've been there 20 years or whatever, best idea wins. And it's just that simple. It just wins. It's got to win every time. And I think that, and people that have come here, we hired this guy. I won't mention all the details about him because people will know exactly who he is. But he came in and he's a PhD. He's had really big jobs in big companies. And I just told him, I said, he said, what's your warning for me? I said, we have really smart people and work really hard. And he came back about 4 months later. The most understated thing you told me when I joined the company was, we had really smart people and we worked really hard. He goes, I've never worked this hard in my career, and I feel like I'm just keeping up with the people around me. So, it kind of, that when you get that formula and you get some sense of mission, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And not because some guy's yelling at you till 3 a.m, 4 days in a row, which we know there's an individual that does that, to try to drive change. That's successful in accomplishing that. It's really not successful about building leaders in the long run, though.
You talked about joining the company and maybe taking it on the chin when you joined on salary, right? So there's something you believe from the beginning in the company. But I mean, look, that is a courageous leap. Even from the beginning, the beginning of Viasat for you was a courageous leap. But as you think about, the arc, was there one moment? And I go, this is almost unfair because of course there's many, but was there a gold medal moment of courage that you showed, or the company showed, that you're like, I remember this as being a pivotal moment for us as a business?
Viasat or me? Which
you know what? I'll give you the A and the B. So we'll start with Viasat, and then let's go to you.
We had invented a new type of a satellite, and it had invention involved. We'd come up with a way. At the time, the highest capacity satellite in the country had about 10 gigabits of capacity. So think about it as throughput. That's a throughput measure. And we thought we could build one that was 150. And the entire industry said, why would you want to do that? That's just stupid. Why would you take that much risk? Don't do it. In fact, all the satellites, if you combine the capacity over the US, all the satellites that were up there had about 70 gigabits capacity. So we went off to build, we tried to convince people to buy, let us help them design one and to buy one. We were a technology provider. And everybody said it's just a stupid idea. So we built 150 gigabit satellite. So we're this asset light, like technology growth company. And when we announced that, our stock went down 40% that day. And the entire market bet against us. And then when we launched the satellite, we had the Guinness World Book record of the highest capacity satellite by an enormous margin. And then our builders sold that technology to our competitor. And we sued them on one, a big patent lawsuit. So, but I'd say up until then, people just thought, you guys are just a bunch of technology guys down there. You really don't. Just stick to your knitting. And I remember being in one of our shareholder meetings and somebody asked the question, you guys build 30 things a month. You build, how are you going to build 1 million modems that go in people's homes? And I said the same way we'd end up building 30 really complex radios that go on airplanes or whatever. We'll track the right people, work through the right infrastructure and outsourcing models, and we'll do it. And it just, that didn't seem very hard to me. What was really hard was designing a satellite when everybody thought you couldn't do it at that type of capacity. So I think that moment changed the direction of the company quite a bit, moving from this asset light technology company to a services company. And the only reason we did it, because we thought people that were denied the access to real internet capacity. And so you had the haves and the have-nots by a big margin. And that's changing in a lot of the markets, but it's not changing around the world. So how do you bring, for me, one of the really kind of important missions is bringing education and healthcare and commerce to people anywhere they want it, so that they don't have to leave to go get it if they don't want to. You have a choice. And what we've learned is that there's a big gap out there. And the other companies were only going to places where the revenues could meet their model, and they just wouldn't invest in other areas. And we could do it without having to. So that gave a real mission. And then really it was how do you go do that and make it make sense for the shareholders? I'd say that was the big pivotal moment at Viasat.
The few words I keep hearing in my head are why not, and why not us?
Yeah.
Why not, and why not us? And when I hear you tell the story about, the true mission, I would say it's not enough just to have our why. You got to have a rally cry on that why. Like, this is a real reason for us to come to work. And really, it's a freedom business, right? Like, if I don't have to, the fits and starts, I can be free to be educated in this market, and I have access from this place. Good things will come of it. So I can see why you were so excited. I guess I get why you stayed 25 years, Rick. I can see why you stayed. What about for you? What about, was there like a moment of courage, and you can, totally take this any way you want? It could be while you're at Viasat. It could be before. Very curious to hear your answer.
I've been lucky because I've always been the guy that was probably the closest guy to getting fired at any moment in all my jobs. I really was, because I just hate rules, and I hate rules that don't make sense. I know you have to have rules. There's no way Boeing or Airbus get an airplane up in the air if people don't follow guidelines and rules and how they build that airplane. So I understand those kind of rules, but I just hate rules that don't make sense. So I just never adhered to them. I got, I came, out of school kind of thinking that I could do more than what was being done. So I just always challenged those things. And I think at the end of the day, the real leaders said, okay, I'd rather have that real progress than you to obey what we told you to go do. So it worked. And I remember being at General Dynamics corporate office in St. Louis. And on the 23rd floor is where all the C-level guys are. And I'm 29 years old or something like that. And I go up there, and in order to go to that 23rd floor, you have to wear a coat. and a jacket and tie and stuff. And so I go up there without a jacket and tie, and I'm 29 years old, and I'm part of this small group of kind of the tiger team that corporate used to go out and do work. So I go up there to brief something to the chairman and the CEO and the president. I briefed it on our way back down, and it went really well. On our way back down, my boss says, the last time somebody did something like that, we banished them to Lima, Ohio. I remember thinking, I've got this family. I've got a family with 2 kids and a third on the way. We can barely afford to make our mortgage payment. We're in a place we don't have any support structure. Don't do something stupid. But I looked down and I said, I'm not going to Lima, Ohio. I mean, you guys, if you want me to go to work for somebody else, I'll go do that. I can do that tomorrow. Otherwise, leave me alone. And we just went down and got on this. And it's funny, nobody ever had to wear a jacket to go to the 23rd floor after that. It seems like a simple thing, but to me, it was like, think I do this well and not have some stupid rules. And if they have stupid rules, then I don't want to be there. I'll go somewhere else and apply my trade. And thank God they didn't fire me. But and that's just kind of how I did it always. I thought, you break rules to break rules. You break rules because they don't make any sense.
So now, first of all, let's have a plan, right? Let's know which rules to break, right? Don't just break rules for the sake of breaking rules. When I think about the audience that listens to the show, I think we'll call 2 separate groups for listening right now, especially if someone's made it a half hour and it's like, thank you for sticking around for this conversation. So I'd say on one side, you've got people that are curious by nature. They want to grow, right? They're listening to shows like this. They want to push themselves. We'll also call it the Baldridge effect, right? Maybe they're at Viasat, or maybe they're a competitor, or maybe they know the family, or maybe they're entrepreneurial in San Diego. So you got your audience, you got my audience. What is like, as you look back at it all, you got the plan, you got break the right rules, kind of round us out with 3 more things we should take and write down as a criteria for the way we go about, this isn't about starting a business, but how we go about leading courageously. What else would you put on that list?
There are things I would definitely do different. I think that my family sacrificed a lot from my time obligation, and I would rebalance that. And I hate the word balance, but in terms of life balance, that's not what I mean. I think I would reprioritize some things there, because I remember being gone when I thought it couldn't be gone because it was an emergency, and it turned out just fine because I made up for it. And so I learned. In fact, when I was at that corporate office, one guy told me, he goes, "You're the best guy that I've ever worked with at figuring out what not to do." And so, there's 24 hours a day of work. And so how do you reprioritize that work in a way that you can live with the things that don't get done and focus on the things that really make a difference? And so figuring out those priorities, I think, is a real key skill. And being able to just say, either I can't do this. If it has to get done, have somebody else do it. So that to me is one. The other one is, I'm sure you've heard of Arthur Brooks. Oh, he's, a national treasure. And he wrote this book, From Strength to Strength. It talks about these 2 curves in your life. And one curve is kind of the rate of personal growth that occurs early on in your career. So you get education or whatever it is. And then it's like, I can do this better than anybody else, right? And that curve ends way earlier than we think it ends. That curve generally ends somewhere in your 30s. And then after that, there's a different type of curve. And that's why you'll see the really successful venture investors or lawyers or whatever, they move into a cycle of developing other people that are improving at that same rate and are focusing on how do we develop those people and then use my kind of background and history to grow this. The people that really grow kind of make that transition. The people that don't, decide they want to be, I'm not saying there's anything negative about it, but, they decide they want to be whatever they are for a long time and apply their skill, but they're going to lose ground to the people coming from behind them. So kind of understanding what that transition is and what you focused on is, I think, a really, really important skill set for people to kind of know out there in business.
I mean, in order to do that, you have to continue to audit yourself, right? And to see,
Yeah.
you're almost like checking yourself. Did you have a process that you would like? Were you just that, were you just that intentional or that aware? So you're constantly checking. Like you said, this is what not to do. Hey, it's like strategy on agility, right? Or did you create time to sit down and was that part of your plan?
It wasn't for quite a while, but then it became much more of that, and so, I don't know. I don't know when I got good at it. I'm not sure when that was, but I definitely transitioned from I can do this better than anybody else to I got to find people that are best at learning and are developing and grow those people. And well, the one thing, there's this one saying that I just love, and it's A's hire A's and B's hire C's.
Hmm.
And it's like you always want to hire and work with people that are better than you. And it's an old goofy saying, but it's true. I mean, people really do that. They want people that are better than them. That's who they want to work with. And the people that are trying to kind of protect their role want somebody working for them that's not quite as good as them, because then
Yeah.
they're protected. And that's a downward spiral.
As you think about just what inspires you, is there a quote you go to? Is there like a quip that you've just always sort of leaned on? And I love the A's, higher A's, and I mean, sadly, the B's. It's so many people are protecting their jobs, but just keeping it pure, like from an inspiration standpoint, is there a quote that rises to the top for you?
No, I wish there were. There's definitely some values that I think are, I check myself against all the time, but I don't think there's really a quote. This When we left Texas to come here, we'd gone from here to Texas, left Texas to come back here. On my way out, the guys gave me the sign that said on President Reagan's desk, and it says, "It can be done." And I'd say that probably summarizes it. I told you the story about how do we go from making 30 things a month to a million things a year, and I kind of always have thought about it that way. It's like, I'm not sure we want to do it, but we probably can do that. And almost all those things. It's like we'll figure that out. That's just not that. That's just have to do these things to figure that out. And the challenge of doing something new constantly is always being ill-equipped for the role that you're doing that day or that year. To me, is really, really important. Otherwise, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. That's not very fun. So I did two things every year for the last 30 years of my life. One thing is I specifically measured and wrote down until I hit it, decisions that could tie myself to, either I influenced or I made available, and measured how much money could I save or create every year until I paid my compensation back. And so I just measured from January 1 and at what point in time am I free to the company for the rest of the year and adding positive value. And I think it's a really good way to think about, am I worth it? Am I adding value to this thing, or am I just taking a bunch of income? And so I did that. And the other thing I did was I'd go every year, and it was usually in kind of the January timeframe, and spend a bunch of time trying to lay out and say, what am I going to do different? What did I do last year? What am I going to do different this year so I'm not doing last year again? And just kind of constantly try to work on those things. And then I would constantly, I think I was pretty good at this, just trying to pay attention to what was going on in the industry tailwinds, so that you're not constantly looking inside. You're saying, what's going on out there? What should we be paying attention to? That if we don't pay attention to, we're going to end up as an irrelevant entity, or I'm going to end up being irrelevant. So those things I think I did pretty well. And I like the little thing is, how do I make sure I'm free? And at what point? And I don't think I ever went past March in doing that. It was usually oftentimes happened in January because I was very focused on it. But I think that's a good way to measure your contribution.
I mean, if you get to March, I mean, you got 9 months of freedom, right? Like, so now I can say whatever
Yeah,
I want, break some rules, right? Go from there.
viewed that as a slow year.
The one quote that I adore, and I think it's no different than the Reagan comment, but it's certainly longer. Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher, used to say, all truth passes through 3 phases. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's deemed self-evident. And,
Yeah,
and to me, that feels, I would call that innovation, right? That's called,
yeah.
oh, anybody could come up with that. Yeah, now that you fought me for the last 5 years on why we're doing this, right? Think back to your losing 40% of the stock price, right?
Yeah.
And until you didn't. And so, man, it's just great having you on the show. You're a source of wisdom. So much that you already shared. I know I can take into my life and into my business. If you're going to wrap a show about courage, what's your takeaway for us?
You know, I do think it's, and what I'm encouraging my kids to do is to, it's kind of overstated, but learn to love what you're doing. And it's not like do what you love, because all these people, well, gosh, I love, paper mache, so I'm gonna sell a bunch of that, whatever. But learn to love what and do it in a way that you can really get into it and love it. And if you really can't, you probably ought to look for something else to do. But because I think not everybody that works hard is kind of, you'd say, ultimately successful, but almost everyone that's ultimately successful works really hard. And so if you're going to work really hard, you better like it, and or like something about it, or do it in a way that you like, that reflects you. And the thing that I'd highlight on that is kind of be you. It's really hard to be somebody else. And I've seen so many executives come through and they read the latest book and they want to be, I want to be like whoever. And that's just a death spiral. It's just not good. You lose a bunch of time. So got to be you, and kind of love what you're doing.
Um, so if you add both of those up, of like be hard, be hard. No, be you and work hard. Be hard is not a bad thing every once in a while, but be you and work hard.
I've got a little reputation there.
So listen, I know your family well, right? We're a stone's throw away from each other, and we're both raising kids around the same age. And maybe this will be like the time capsule episode that in about 5 to 7 years, my son and daughter kind of pull up. And if I have one fear, it's that, well, there's 2 fears. One is a personal one, and one is like a California one. So my California fear is that I worry that we're going to raise really soft children in this market. And like, this is my own shit. This is my own stuff. And so, coming from the East Coast, even 4 seasons, okay, having to put on layers is a way to like a character building moment. So one of my things is I worry about, like, am I really doing them a favor to prepare them for the world? This is, again, my own stuff. And then the second one is, as much as I travel, I'm grateful to do it. I love what I do. I get to be myself. I get paid to tell the truth. That's what I get. That's my job. And sometimes that's a hard conversation that needs to happen. But I want my kids to know that daddy's on the road working hard, because that's what it costs, and that's what it takes to live in a special place like Southern California. So I've always been at peace with that, even though I also have that fear, like you said, like, know which trips you need to go on and which ones you
Yeah.
don't, so you don't miss out. So look, know that you're landing. It lands with me, as a guy that's still trying to figure it out. I can't imagine I'm the only one that's feeling that way. So thanks for the advice. And yeah, sometimes be hard is actually be you, work hard, be
Well,
hard.
there's one of the books that I had sent to the people, my kids. One of the books that I sent to all of them was Clayton Christensen's How Will You Measure Your Life? I don't know if you've read that book, but Clayton Christensen argues in that book that we as parents should design experiments for our kids to fail and grow. And that just enabling success is really not a good long-term character thread for them. And he talks about things that his mother had done for him as he was young as absolutely critical elements to his growth and commitment to doing well. And he talks about a bunch of things that would go the other way. And so I wish I would have read that book earlier, but I still think we did pretty well. I'm pretty happy with how my kids have turned out. But I think that there's some really good principles in that book. I'll send you a copy.
I'd love it. Yeah. And I'm here to, the ones that I know, I think you did just fine with, and they're good people. And I know how intentional they are with their babies, and they're great neighbors. So Rick, appreciate you, man. I didn't mean to pull you away from the 50% of not knowing what you were doing, but on a rainy day, I don't feel that bad. Thanks for joining us today, Rick. Be good, man. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.